Today I'm doing part 3 of my teaching on God, which is our theme for the year. And in part 1, we talked about God as the eternal. In part 2, we said God is omnipotent and He's the creator. And in part 3, we are going to look at God as spirit. God is spirit. Now, one of the things you have to learn as you read Genesis chapter 1 is that God is revealing Himself to us. God is revealing Himself. It is God's self-revelation. And so everything we read is God showing us step by step who He is, what kind of person He is, His nature, and all of that. So we learn that God is eternal. We learn that God is the creator, and He creates without any help. He is omnipotent. No one helps Him to create. But who is God? We know that the heavens are material. We know that the earth is material. You can see it, you can touch it. But who is this God who is eternal, and this God who is omnipotent and a creator? And that's what verse 2 of Genesis chapter 1 tells us about God. So we read in verse 2 of Genesis chapter 1. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. There are many ways to take this verse, but I just want to focus on the Spirit of God part. And the word I want us to look at is the word Spirit. And I've spoken about this word several times, especially when I was teaching on life in the Spirit. And the Hebrew word there is ruach. Ruach. And ruach has several connotations, like breath, wind, strength. The word spirit is very difficult to define. How do you define spirit? So as you read the Bible, both in the Greek and in the Hebrew, the word that is used for spirit has different connotations. Many times it says air, and sometimes it means wind, it means strength, it means a force. Generally, spirit is something that is not physical. So I'm going to attempt to define it in a way that makes sense to all of us. So the first thing I say about spirit is that it is immaterial. Spirit is immaterial. What does that mean? It means it does not have physical properties. And that's why it's difficult to describe, because everything we know has physical properties. Even the air has physical properties. It has an atomic base. It has neutrons and protons, and then there's an atomic base. So although we don't see it, it is material. The air is material. The wind is material. We don't see it. It's material. But when we say something is spirit, it means it has no material. That means it has no physical property. You can't touch it. It is there, but it is not physical. Everything in the universe has material property. So the sun has material property. The moon is material. The stars are material. You are material. Auditorium is material. We can see it. But when we say something is spirit, it has nothing of these properties. So how do you define it? Because there's no language in the universe to describe spirit, because it doesn't occur in the universe. It occurs somewhere outside of the universe, and I explained a little bit. So first, it is immaterial. It has no physical property. Second, something that is spirit is invisible. Invisible. You can't see it. You can't see it. So how do you describe something that is not material and that is not also seen? How do you describe it? What kind of qualification can you give it? So the best is to say it's like air. That's why sometimes people say God is air. When you want to talk to God, speak into the air. Or onam framemu. Because air is the closest element we can use to describe spirit. But air has material properties. It has hydrogen in it, it has oxygen in it, it has carbon dioxide in it, it has nitrogen in it, and all of these are atomic. But spirit has no atoms. So although we use air to describe spirit, spirit is not air, because spirit is immaterial and it is invisible. So what does Genesis chapter 1 tell us about God? Let's read it again. It says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. What does that tell us about God? It tells us very simply that God is spirit. This God who created the universe, he is spirit. He is spirit. He's not made of the same material as the universe is made of. He's not made of the same material as the earth is made of. God is spirit. Ruach Elohim. God is spirit. But in the passage, God is spirit is described as the Spirit of God. So this is what I say. The Spirit of God is God. The Spirit of God is not different from God. It's not like God is one person and then he has a spirit that he sent into the world. The Spirit of God is God. God is spirit. The Spirit of God is God. So right there in Genesis, we are told that God is a spirit. The Creator is a spirit. God is a spirit. Because God is a spirit, it's very difficult to discern him. There is no laboratory, the most sophisticated laboratory in the world cannot discover God. Because a laboratory can only discover something that has atoms. But since God is a spirit and spirits have no atom, no laboratory can find a spirit. No microscope can find a spirit. No telescope can find a spirit. No scientific discovery can ever locate a spirit. Because a spirit is made out of a material that is not atomic. And there's no way a science can discover a spirit. It's the same like the spirit in you. There's no scientific way to discover the spirit in you because the spirit in you is also not atomic. So people say, well, how do we find spirit? People die and then they say the spirit is gone. How do we find the spirit? Well, the spirit is made up of an essence that is not atomic, it's not material. It's like the story is told of a people in an island who didn't understand modern life and civilization. And one day, a radio washed ashore to their island. So they pick the radio, they tingle with it, and all of a sudden they hear voices in the radio. So they feel that there are voices in the radio. And they hear women talking, they hear men talking, they hear guitar playing, they hear sound. So they decided, if these sounds are all in the radio, then when we open up the radio, we should see a woman there, we should see a man there, we should see guitar there. So very, very scientifically, they opened the radio and realized that there was no voice there, because that voice is not a property of the radio. The radio is able to receive it, but it is not part of the radio. In the same way, the spirit in you is not part of your physical being. So they can cut you, dissect you into all pieces. Scientists, psychologists can do all they can. They will never discover spirit, because spirit has no material base and spirit is invisible. Are you getting me? And the original spirit is God. He's not the only spirit, but he's the original spirit, because later on he also gave us spirit, and angels are spirits. Unfortunately, the bad boy is also spirit. We'll deal with him later. So if you tell me, so you say there's God, how can we find God? We've gone to the moon, there's no God. What? You cannot invent a human instrument of any form to discover God, because every human instrument is atomic based. And spirit is non-atomic. It's not material, and it is invisible. But that is not the rest of the story. Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 tells us that although God is spirit, and he is not material and he is invisible, he is real and active. He is real and active. The passage says the Spirit of God was hovering. The Spirit of God is real. Although he's invisible, he does not have a physical material property. He is real. He's not an imagination. He's not something we make up to comfort ourselves. The Spirit of God is real. So there is a reality that is not based on the material world. There is another reality. It's the spirit reality. The Spirit of God is real. But that's not the only thing the passage teaches us about the Spirit of God. It also teaches us that the Spirit of God can be sensed and felt. He is not material, but he can be sensed. His presence can be sensed. You can know when he's in a place, and you can feel it, but you can't dissect it. How does the passage tell us that? It says that the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Hovering. The Hebrew word merakafet. Hovering. It's like gives the impression of like a bird fluttering its wings on water. It's like a helicopter moving on water. When that is happening, the water will feel the presence and be disturbed. So that's the impression that Genesis 1:2 tells us. That God's Spirit, when the Spirit of God moves in a place, although you can't see him, and although you cannot physically feel his presence, you will still have a sense that he's there. You have a sense that God is there. Now, many times when people say, I feel the Spirit of God, in a real sense, when people say that, there will be something that gives them that sense. Sometimes in a service, at a point, you just sense God. You sense his presence. For some people, they will cry. They will shed a tear. For some people, they will feel goosebumps. For some people, they will feel like trembling. For some people, they will fall down. All of these physical manifestations are telling you that something you felt which you couldn't see in the spirit realm has had an impact on you. Just like in Genesis, the Spirit of God had an impact upon the waters. He moved upon the waters. He affected the waters. He affected the earth. So the Spirit of God is immaterial, invisible, but he's real, he's active, and you can feel his presence. And God has designed human beings. I'm rushing now. This is part something later, but let me bring it here. God has designed human beings with the capacity to sense his presence. Now, you can sense his presence and deny it. You can sense his presence and say, I think it's just me. You can just sense his presence and say, I feel it's something, something. Whether you call it something, something, or something, nothing, the Spirit of God is real, he is active, and he witnesses to you all the time when he is present in your life. And there are times you go to a place where people are conscious of the presence of God, sometimes in worship, in praise, and you will know that although I can't see it, and although I can't physically feel it, something is happening to me. And that something happening to you is the Spirit of God, the creator of the universe, telling you, I am here. And I'm working. So the Spirit of God is real and active. The Spirit of God can be sensed or felt. He's a real person. Later on, when we go further in the Bible, the Spirit of God is distinguished from other spirits, because at this point, this is the only spirit. But by the time human beings are created, they also have spirit. So the Spirit of God has to be distinguished from the human spirit and also from other spirits, the devil and his gang. So the Spirit of God was later called the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit. Why is he called the Holy Spirit? Because he's not the only spirit. There are other spirits, but he's unique. And so we call him Holy Spirit.
We've come to the end of this video. We believe you've been blessed. Remember, God's love is steadfast and unchanging. May his grace and peace be with you always. If you're new here, consider subscribing to stay up to date with our videos. Kindly share this video with your friends and families. You can watch this next video on your screen.